In the last lecture, we began a discussion on impact of climate change. One of the most visible impact of climate change is heat wave. Okay? And we mentioned this heat wave that occurred in Ahmedabad in 2010 around 22nd May, where 200 more people died on account of that heat wave than a normal death rate. So, this kind of heat wave which occurs in May is what one would call a dry heat wave, that is heat wave on account of high temperature, but humidity is not very high. Such heat waves can be, you can make sure that death rate is low by taking suitable action, and this was done by the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation in a plan called Heat Action Plan. Okay. So, this was launched in 2013 and they estimated they have saved about 1,000 lives by doing this. Now, this approach will work for a dry heat wave, because in the case of dry heat wave, all you have to do is to drink more water, keep your head cool by putting a wet cloth or have a fan. So, when the heat wave is dry, there are fairly simple ways to deal with it, and this is what the heat action plan is all about. But there is another kind of heat wave which is much more difficult to deal with, and that is the moist heat wave, where you have to worry about both the dry bulb temperature as well as temperature of a thermometer kept wet by a wick. Okay. Now, why is this important? Because if both the dry bulb temperature and humidity are high, then the standard methods of cooling yourself will not work. The usual method of cooling yourself during a dry heat wave is to ensure that you drink enough water and you are able to evaporate more, so that you keep your body cool. But if the ambient humidity and temperature both are high, then your body cannot evaporate more and more moisture. Okay? So, this was discussed in 2010 paper by Sherwood and Huber. They say there is an adaptability limit to climate change due to heat stress. That is, those living in coastal areas will face a serious problem as the temperature goes up and the humidity is high in coastal regions. Then there will come a point you will not be able to maintain your core body temperature at 37 degrees centigrade, which is required. Remember that your brain is a computer, it has to be kept cool, and if the temperature in the brain goes above 37, then your brain will not function, you will have all kinds of problems. So, this is something for which there is no simple solution, and in India there are many places which already are having temperatures around 38 and relative humidity, the humidity compared to the maximum humidity that is possible, around 50%. So, this is what they call the zone. If you go beyond this orange to red, it becomes critical, because at that point you cannot maintain your core body temperature at 37, and that will cause death. Okay. Now, the only way to handle such situation of high temperature and high humidity is air conditioning. There is no other alternative. Okay. The Ahmedabad heat action plan won't work in the coastal areas if the temperature is above 38 and humidity is above 50. Okay. So, this problem is a very serious one, and many countries in the tropics, especially along the coastline, will face this critical challenge on account of climate change. Now, this has been examined by the National Weather Service in the United States, and they have coined a term called heat index, which depends both on temperature and humidity. And so this is humidity, this is temperature, and the blue line is the border. Okay. If you are below this line, you can manage. If you are above this line, you cannot manage. And this line you can see is typically 35 degrees centigrade and 50% humidity. Okay. Above that condition, you cannot handle the heat without air conditioning. Now, we have estimated the number of days in which this heat index is above 40 degrees centigrade. Okay. Number of hours and the number of grids here. Compared to 1964, you can see that the number of such hours and number of grids in India have gone up 6 times in June and July. Okay. So, it is quite clear that already many parts of India are experiencing heat index above 40, for which there are no simple solution except air conditioning. So, we need to worry about how countries like India will deal with moist heat waves, which is going to occur more often in the coming 40 years. And this is example from one city, Delhi, in June and July. In June is not that bad number of hours, but July it goes up after the onset of the monsoon. And you can see that the number of hours in July, which is about 100 hours in 1969, has gone to close to 300 hours in 2022. So, and this will continue to increase because of global warming. So this issue is something which has to be dealt with, because a large number of people, especially those working outdoors, those working in agriculture, those working in construction industries and factories which have no air conditioning, they will have a serious problem. Before the issue of death due to humid heat wave, we need to worry about the fact that the efficiency of working will go down dramatically. Okay. Human ability to work under these conditions will decline dramatically. So, agriculture workers, construction workers and factory workers will be able to work for less time, or you need to find a different working hours, maybe in the evening, to reduce the impact of the humid heat wave. Now, this shows the number of households which have air conditioning in the world in 2016. You can see in the advanced countries in the world is close to 90%, China is 60%, India is around 5%. So, India and South Africa and Indonesia, all these countries will face this huge challenge of dealing with humid heat waves when majority of the household do not have air conditioners. Now, in addition to heat wave, there is a question of drought, when there is a long period of no rainfall. And in Brazil, in the Amazon basin, from June to November 2023, they faced an exceptionally long drought. Okay? And this based on the standardized precipitation evaporation index, which takes into account both rainfall as well as evaporation, because in the case of crops, remember that rainfall alone does not define drought. If rainfall is average and the temperature is high, there is a lot more evaporation, the root will wilt because of lack of moisture. Now, this point you have to remember in the context of the Köppen climate classification. Any area in the world will have various climate zones depending on the temperature and rainfall. India is typically around this region, about 100 centimeters annual rainfall and temperature around 25. Okay? That is why we are a savanna. Okay? But as the temperature increases by 3 to 4 degrees, and if rainfall decreases, then we can become a subtropical desert. Okay. So, this is a threat countries like India will have to deal with. The kind of climate that exists in Rajasthan might spread southward to Maharashtra, Gujarat, Karnataka and so on, if the temperature goes up by 5 degrees and rainfall comes down. Okay. So, other thing to remember that not only human beings, heat and humidity in the tropics are already reaching the limits for mammals. Their ability to live is being now challenged by this high heat and humidity. Here is an example in US in 2010 on account of heat wave, the annual US dairy production of milk went down and cost about more than $1 billion. So, remember that it is not a question of death. If the humidity and temperature are high, cows will produce less milk. So, this is an issue of economic importance in addition to threat to life. Now, in Kenya, where there are well known Maasai herders who have been living a very simple life for the last 10,000 years, they are noticing that the cattle are unable to withstand the heat, okay, cows and buffaloes. So, they find that goats are able to tolerate high temperature than the cows and buffaloes. That is not surprising, because the animal is small, it has more surface area compared to the volume. Okay. The volume determines how much heat you generate, and area is what is available to get rid of the heat. So, as you become larger and larger, your ability to dissipate heat becomes less efficient. For example, as the temperature rises in India, elephants will face a major challenge, because they are huge mammals and they generate a lot of heat, and their area is small compared to their volume. So, many large mammals, elephants, tigers, lions, leopards will face a challenge during these heat waves. And this is not just theory. This year in the month of May, monkeys dropped dead during a strong heat wave in Mexico. The monkeys couldn't manage the heat. So, we must remember that the global warming poses a threat not only to human life, but to all large mammals. So, this is something about which sufficient attention has not been paid by the policy makers. Now, the next major threat which we are seeing in the last 10 years is forest fires. As the temperature goes up and if rainfall goes down, the forest becomes drier and there is a lot of combustible material in the forest, and either lightning or a fire set by some human being can lead to large forest fires. Okay. Now, forest fire depends upon how well you manage the forest, how long the drought is, how strong the winds are, and how high the temperature. Okay. So, determining how much climate change contributes to forest fire is not easy, because it is not temperature alone which controls forest fires. It is the wind, it is the period with no rainfall, and how well we are managing the forest. So, according to a recent paper, at least 30 additional days are above the critical threshold for fire activity, okay, in every continent by the end of the century. Okay. And so, this issue is again very serious, because large forest areas, if they start having major fires, there is no way human beings can actually control these fires. These fires have been seen in Canada, in California, in Russia. These affect millions of hectares, and human beings just cannot use fire engines to control these forest fires. Now, here is an example of tree cover loss due to forest fires and non-forest fire causes during the last 22 years. And you see a big jump in the year 2023. In 2023, Canada had a tree cover loss of 8 million hectares. Okay? This is much larger than the total forests in India. Now, people have looked at this issue of the global and regional trends that drive the forest fires, and you can see clearly that some parts of the world, like Pacific region of United States, Amazon, the rate at which the fire season length is increasing is much faster than we normally experience. Okay? So, this is a warning that there will be more and more forest fires. The black line is a prediction by models, and the red line is really the observation. So, things are happening much faster and much worse than what climate models had predicted will happen in the next few decades. Okay? Now, I must recall that we had an Indo-Russian workshop on climate change about 15 years ago in Cochin. At that time, the Russian scientists argued that Russia will benefit by climate change. There are many parts of Russia very cold and not suitable for agriculture. So, they argued that as the temperature warms in Russia, there will be more and more area suitable for agriculture. But this is a very short-sighted notion, because the very next year Russia faced a major heat wave, and it caused a huge number of deaths in Moscow, and it caused large forest fires, which you see here, which could not be controlled by human beings, and they had to wait till natural processes ultimately stop these forest fires. So, you can see here in this graph the cumulative areas of forest fire. Areas burn normally because without climate change due to other causes, and additional area burn because of climate change. Okay? So, the additional area due to rising temperature, snow melting away, and forest is drier and a longer drought. Okay? To show you how dramatic these forest fires are, in 2023, when Canada had a major forest fire, there was a serious air pollution crisis in New York. So, New York is quite far away from where the forest fires occurred in Canada, but that smoke traveled all the way to the New York state, and this is what you see in New York City. Okay? So, you can imagine that forest fire will lead to crisis not only locally, but also in regions very far away. Okay? So, forest fire poses a threat not only to the country where it occurs, but to adjacent countries also. Now, Australia also had a major forest fire in the last 5 years, and again to give you a perspective, it killed about 1 billion animals. Okay? So, you must remember that climate change induced forest fires are killing animals not in thousands and millions, but in billions. Okay? So, this is a matter of very grave consequence to life on earth, and human beings who caused this climate change must do something about it. Okay. So, that covered forest fires. The other major long term consequence of climate change is sea level rise. So, as the temperature of the world goes up, the temperature of the ocean also goes up, and when the temperature goes up, all of you know, if you heat water, its volume will increase due to expansion. So, sea level will rise, that is one reason. In addition, glaciers will start melting, and that melt water will reach the ocean. Okay. So, this combination of melting glaciers on land and increasing temperature of the ocean has caused the sea level to rise by 3 millimeters per year. It may look small, but over a period of 100 years, that only is 30 centimeters. And the IPCC predicts that the sea level rise may increase up to 1 meter in the next 80 years. Okay? And that will pose a threat to lot of coastal areas all around the tropics. Now, you can see the global sea level rise was slowly rising, then it actually fell slightly 500 years ago, and then began to rise rapidly. Okay? And here black is reconstruction from various proxy sources, green is the tide gauge observations along the harbors, red is a model. So, model and the proxy reconstruction and tide all agree in the last 50 years that the sea level is rising of the order of 3 millimeters per year, and this rise is 5 times larger than what happened in the last 1000 years. Okay? So, it is really going up rapidly and needs to be looked at. Now, the reason why sea level rise is so critical for a country like India and Bangladesh is because large parts of eastern India are very close to the sea level. Okay? This is a height above sea level, and you can see many parts of coastal Orissa, West Bengal, Bangladesh are within 1 meter to 2 meter from the sea level, and if the sea level rises, it will inundate the land. In addition, whenever there is a cyclone which hits this region at least a few times a year, the sea will surge further and will more inundation of cities like Calcutta and Dhaka. So, this is a serious issue, not in the next 10 years, but in the next 100 years. Which are the countries at most risk due to rising sea levels? And you can see that for a 2-degree rise in temperature, 64 million people are at risk in China and about 20 million in India. Okay? If it is 4 degrees, the number almost doubles. Okay? So, the main countries under the threat are all in Asia: Japan, Indonesia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, India and China. Okay? So, these are the countries which have to worry about sea level rise. Okay? And what is the contribution from anthropogenic and natural causes? You can see that if you look at only observed here is in black, if you combine human induced greenhouse gases and natural, it is in orange, quite close. But if you only take greenhouse gases alone, it is here, the gray line. Okay? So, the sea level is not rising as rapidly as we expected because of aerosols, which we discussed in some detail earlier when talking about global mean temperature. So, because the global mean temperature did not rise as rapidly, the sea level rise is only about 30-40 millimeters and not 80 millimeters around 2020, Now, remember that as we control our air pollution and aerosol are removed from the atmosphere, the sea level will rise even faster. So, this is a warning given in IPCC report. This figure is taken from that recent report. Okay. Now, the other complication we have in India is that not only sea level is rising due to global warming and glacier melting, land is subsiding. Parts of Bangladesh and West Bengal are subsiding. Land subsides due to two reasons. One is removal of groundwater. When you pump groundwater from below the ground, the soil which contains water becomes free of water and the soil collapses. Okay. So, this subsidence is well known. Wherever groundwater extraction is large, there the land subsides. Okay. And the land subsidence is much faster than global warming. So, we have to worry about large groundwater removal in India. India is a country has the largest amount of groundwater extraction in the world. Okay. And we need to worry about that, because that along with global warming gives you double the threat. If the sea level is rising and the land is subsiding, the rate of inundation of the coastal areas will be much more than what we have experienced so far. Okay. And I give examples of coastal part of Mumbai, which will be inundated by 2050, just 25 years from now, because of land subsidence and sea level rise. And the same thing is true for Orissa, West Bengal, Bangladesh. All of them have a serious threat of inundation because of sea level rise and land subsidence. So, this issue is a very serious long term threat, and this has to be tackled in terms of either resettling the population to somewhat higher areas. Okay. Now, the reason why sea level is rising is the ocean is actually absorbing all the additional heat that is trapped by the carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. Okay. So, land only contributes a small portion of the heat absorption. Ocean, because it is well mixed, absorbs heat much more readily, and that is why sea level rise is posing a problem to us. Okay. Now, I will conclude this lecture with a discussion of sea level rise. In the next lecture, we will talk about extreme rainfall. Extreme rainfall is a serious issue which has become more and more common in the last few decades. Okay. Thank you.